Hi everyone, welcome to Hot Seat with Cognizant Clay. I am your host Clayton Terrio. Today on the show we have Joe Logie. He is diagnosed with Becker's muscular dystrophy. He is a father of one, a writer, and a disability advocate. I hope you guys enjoy it. How are you doing right now through all the COVID craziness?
Yeah, pretty good. Today's been interesting. My daughter started school again, but it's all through Google Classrooms. They got given a whole list of assignments to do. One of the ones today was the weather forecast. So it was just to do a little sort of report on the weather, just to write it down. And we thought we could go one better and made that video. So thanks to the use of an app on my phone and TikTok, we were able to put together a little weather studio, and yeah, she had a great time. So yeah, it's been a pretty good day so far.
Yeah, it's good. Well, it's a smart way of doing it. I mean, it looked pretty good for just throwing it together,
Yep,
which is always good. Thank God for technology, right?
it makes things so much easier. So now she's got ambitions of making a full-length feature film using TikTok background. So that's like 15-minute segments all the way through. It's
Oh,
going to be a
wow.
nightmare to edit, but I'm sure we'll manage.
Well, that's good. I'm glad she's still able to learn because it is hard right now. So as we discussed before, you, Joe, are diagnosed with Becker's muscular dystrophy,
Yep.
which is, again, I have Duchenne's if anyone's interested who's watching. What kind of challenges are you presented due to Becker's, and how do you overcome them?
I think mobility is just the big issue. I think that goes for all of us, to be fair. Just being a dad becomes difficult when you've got a condition like this, you know. There's things that you want to do as a dad with your daughter that you can't do, and at times it does get you really down. That's one thing I've always sort of explained to people is this condition, it will have a profound physical impact, but also have a massive mental impact, you know, that you know for a fact that you can't do things that other people can, even things that you used to be able to do yourself. The problem with Becker's is because it is progressive as well, I feel that you get this really weird taste of normality is the wrong word, but you get this taste of an everyday experience, you know, that I was able to walk when I was younger,
Hmm.
and then it gradually starts to go away from you. So like I said to you when we spoke last, it went through a whole progression of general muscle weakness to using a walking stick to then progressing onto a wheelchair when needed it. So it's a big change. And I think the biggest challenge is just the challenge of having the condition itself. You know, it progresses and you don't know what's going to happen one day to the next. With this condition as well, like my granddad just had a really bad experience of it in that he just woke up one day and found that his legs suddenly refused to cooperate. And that was him. And I don't expect to have the exact same experience, but there's always that little thing in the back of your head that these pains or this way I'm feeling today could potentially be the day that I never walk again. Also, the only
Right.
way really to overcome it is to be positive about it where you can. And I think a big thing to do is talk about it. Just going on to the whole Dystrophy Dad thing that I'd set up on Instagram, that was the whole reason for that. I had an issue a few years ago where I had a breakdown. It wasn't long after the little one was born. And it was just that whole attempt of trying to balance what you want to be versus what you can be. You know, it just totally overwhelmed me. And I went through so many months of going, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine, until suddenly I wasn't fine. No, I was in the office, I was at work, and everything just fell apart around me. I was signed off for 6 weeks just to sort of try and get things back together, went on antidepressant medication and grew a beard. But throughout the whole thing, it's trying to adapt to the changes the condition brings. Another good coping mechanism is obviously having the family that I have. You know, I've got a daughter that makes me want to push myself that bit more. I've got a wife that supports me and looks out for whenever I'm having trouble, you know, tries to encourage me to slow down or take a rest whenever I need to, rather than just pushing through it and trying to be overly manly, you know.
Yeah, and I think that's the hard part. Like you say, it's every day's different, and it's you need to learn not to get used to it, and that's, I think, very hard for a lot of people, even able-bodied people. A change at work or a change, you don't know when something's coming, but for us, it's day to day, and
Yeah,
it's, for me, I'm like you. I like to talk about it because it gets it out, and I'm not afraid to be emotional about it or anything like that. And that's really helped me, as my parents have told me, just talk about it and you'll be
yeah.
fine. Like, as fine as you can be. Who would you say has motivated you through this whole process of being diagnosed and, living day to day with it?
So it's varied. There's lots of people that help out different ways. Like primarily my family, you know, my wife, my daughters, I've mentioned. With the condition, I was diagnosed at birth. This was because I had a grandfather who'd had the condition. He was a spontaneous mutation. So out of all his brothers, he was the only person to present symptoms of this condition. So because that family history was there, you know, they knew to look out for it, and I was tested quite early on through muscle biopsy, and it came to light that I had the condition. But being a young boy and seeing my granddad at a stage where I would progress to was interesting, in some ways beneficial. I'm not going to say it wasn't scary, because sometimes you think, oh, that's going to be me. You know, I won't be able to do these things. I might need help getting around all these things, you know. But at the same time, it gives you a bit of an understanding of what to expect. With him, though, his approach to having the condition was quite unique. And actually, I wouldn't say it's unique in the fact that we've spoken about this before, about how dark humour tends to help in these really difficult situations. And he was that exact type of person. He would make inappropriate jokes all day long. You know, just about these little things like let's go for a walk, or, you know, just in the middle of a serious conversation where everyone was like, there's something important going on, he was just deciding to be a bit of an asshole, have a joke about it. You know, just downplay his condition, just so other people would laugh. There's a lot of cool stories about him. There's one particular, like my granddad, and this is something we might go on to. I've got this whole thing about disabled people being three-dimensional. You know, that it's not this general, oh, that poor little person in the wheelchair, just pat him on the head and, oh, just feel sorry for him, you know, say a prayer for him. All that, I hate that approach, because we're people, we're fallible all the way through. My granddad was a barman at one point. He worked in a bar in this place called East Kilbride that's outside Glasgow, and you'll find it on a map because it's got 700 roundabouts on the way to it. Slight exaggeration there. But he worked behind the bar, and one night he was in there, one of the patrons started to get a bit rowdy, and he asked him to leave. The guy pushed back and asked what he was going to do. So the guy was quite tough. My grandfather was quite tough in his own way as well, wouldn't back down from anyone, and tried to chase the guy out the bar. The next minute there was a fight. The guy goes to swing for my granddad and misses, because my granddad's knees gave out at that exact time. And just because like he had that option, had that happen, he was on the floor, able to come up with an uppercut, knock the guy in his ass and drag him out of bar. You know, and it's one of these things that you see these people with disabilities thought of as being sort of weak-willed and not tough, but we're bloody tough, you know. I've just seen him do that. My favourite story about that was the bar he worked in, everyone referred to him as Heap, for the sheer reason that because his knees gave out that regularly, they'd look for him, they wouldn't see him, and then find a heap on the floor where he was. You know, but again, it's seeing that, like, that sort of gave me a more rounded view of what it's like to, like, just to be a person with this condition. That you can be an asshole, but you can be a good person as well, you know. And it's just him, this whole approach to it, his humour, his light, just made him such a massive influence in my life. He died 11 years ago. It was the year of my wedding, and we built the whole thing around him, made sure that we had an accessible venue to make sure he could get there, and then that happened, you know, the lead up to it. And it was a pretty tough time, that. It was really hard to get through, you know. I hadn't seen him in a little while just because life tends to get in the way, so it'd been about 3 months. And he died pretty much through the night. And it broke me up like a huge, huge bit. But I started to think about him as a person and what he would like. So when we had the funeral, I'd written a poem which was quite humorous. I wish I had a copy now. But the whole poem was about the idea of putting fun in the funeral. And it got to a point where people were laughing during the funeral proceedings. So just that, like, it was so good for me to sort of use his sense of humour to celebrate his life rather than being a more depressing occasion. With him, though, I got into my writing in a big way because of him. I didn't like the way his story ended, so I found myself writing a poem that sort of gave an idea of what his heaven was like. He was a big fan of westerns, so I had this whole concept of his heaven being a western saloon, God being the barman, and my granddad being who he was, not even backing down when God was trying to give him into trouble. But I'd say, like, he was just a massive, massive influence on me, and he shaped the way I view this condition, you know. Like, it is tough, but if it wasn't for him, I don't think I'd be able to handle it as good as I can.
Right, and that's, like you say, his memory lives on. It's hard to deal with at first, but I think that's a very good way of approaching it. It reminds me of my dad. At my grandpa's funeral, my dad was the first person to speak, and he looked at the casket and said, "Dad, don't get up." Because my grandpa he was blind from the 90s on, so he was disabled as well, and that also, even though I'm not blind, I have muscular dystrophy, he was very, very inspirational to me as well. So that's really good to hear. I'm glad you shared that, because
Yeah,
he's, like you say, he lives on, and the humor, I get you with the dark humor. Like, my mom's worked in
yeah,
a hospital for 30 years, and it's always just laughing at even terrible things, because at the end of the day, we're all living through it, and it's hard. And my personal Instagram page, as you know, is called Gimpy Clay, because
yeah.
GIMP is another word for disabled person, and I
That's it.
just figured that was a good and funny, lighthearted name, which
Yeah.
really helps me get through it. Is there what else? Who else would have shaped you other than him? Would you say, like, obviously your daughter? Like, what do
Yep.
your daughter and wife do for you on a daily basis?
So my daughter exists, which is a very good place to start, you know. When it came to my daughter, her name's Winter. We named her after that because winter's a very family-focused season. You know, with Christmas and New Year and all those things, everyone's together, everyone's cozy and warm. So despite the fact it's a cold time, it's a warm time, you know. We were told that we couldn't have kids. I'd sustained an injury as a child, and I was told by a doctor that, well, actually several doctors, that we would never conceive naturally. So we went down the IVF route, and we decided that we were either going to have a kid as a result of this, or we were going to sell up, just get rid of the house and just travel, you know, and a bit more mobility at the time. You know, I had the stick, but I'm sure I could manage, you know. So that was the plan, was just to up sticks and go somewhere else. The week before the IVF treatment was supposed to start, we found out my wife was pregnant. And I can't even describe, you know, how that felt. Just, you were told that this was near enough an impossibility, you know, like this wasn't going to ever happen for you. We'll try it, we'll see what we can do, but, you know, don't get your hopes up. And all of a sudden this child just comes into existence. You know, and the fact that we were able to have this little, it sounds really cheesy, really Hallmark, but the fact that we were able to have this little miracle come into our lives just made a massive difference, you know. And although I've obviously got my reasons to keep fighting for the sake of my wife as well, but I think just having a kid shapes that entirely differently. You know, you kind of realise that there's this person that does depend on you. And I'm not saying that we should always push by our boundaries, but sometimes you can and sometimes you should. And having her there makes me do that, you know. So there's times where I'm struggling. I have to remember why I'm doing these things and to be there for her. She also helps just by being so understanding of this condition. That she understands there's things that I can't do. You know, there's like, we want to go on a trip and I might not be able to do it, or we might promise to do something one day and all of a sudden I can't because my condition's flared up to the point where I just can't even get out of bed. But she's really understanding of that, and she appreciates that things will happen, but we'll always make it up at other times. I think just having this girl, she's 8 years old, you know, and she's able to understand that I've got these limitations, that I'm not like other dads, but she loves the fact that I'm not like other dads. Like I said, it's not very many kids who get to sit on their dad's knees and go down hills in their wheelchair, you know. She has a great time with that. As for my wife Tracy, it's kind of similar in the same way that she's there for me through everything, you know. Tracy came into my life when I was 20. Yeah, 20. Bumped into her just after Christmas at this nightclub. We were both dressed up as a schoolboy and a schoolgirl. It was a fancy dress thing. I don't know what we were doing, but we were young, you know. And we started sort of seeing each other. A couple of weeks into it, very early on, you know, I told her that I loved her. I had this genuine feeling that I did. I just had to say it. I was a bit scared that she might run a mile, but it was reciprocated, you know. She said, "Oh, I love you too." And I remember it was a family party we were at, and Crazy in Love by Beyonce and Jay-Z just happened to come on right after that happened, you know, so it was a bit of a fun moment. But me and Tracy, we sat down a few weeks later, just after I'd said that, and I felt that I had to explain the fact that I had this condition, you know, what it meant long term. I felt like it wasn't fair to just maybe spring this on her 5 years down the line and go, surprise, I can't walk, you know. So
Yeah.
I took her, it was my mum's house I was staying at the time. I took her hand and asked her to sit down in the bed, that I had something really important to tell her. And she looked up at me, and as I was speaking, the back of my head was like, oh shit, she thinks I'm breaking up with her because of the sheer way I did that, you know, like sit down, I've got some news. And I explained to her, look, I've got this muscle wasting condition called Becker's muscular dystrophy. It's a progressive condition, so it means it will get worse over time. There will be a day where I won't ever be able to walk again. And her response was, is that all? Just having that little moment that, like, the biggest concern that was with her was that we weren't ever going to be together after this point, not that I was going to have this condition which would do unusual things to my body over time. And just having that response just showed me how much value I had in myself. Like, Clay, when I grew up, I didn't think I'd ever find a girlfriend who would want to be with me. I didn't think I'd get to be a dad. But here we are, and I think just having her in my life and that acceptance of my condition and showing me that all things are possible with her, it's just been absolutely amazing. I feel like I couldn't get through a day without her now. I recently, just a
Right,
little anecdote, I was going to say I recently
and that's
spent
just
2
it.
weeks. Yeah, sorry. Sorry, I'm
No,
just
go
talking on.
ahead. Go ahead.
I had to go to Cardiff to do training for a job back in November, and I was away from Tracy and Winter for those full 2 weeks. There was no point in me coming back. I could have come back at the weekend, but it's a 6-hour train journey, and by the time I get back, I'm preparing to leave to come back down. So I didn't come back up, and those 2 weeks were absolutely hell. Just the thought of not having my family there, trying to talk to my daughter through video chat, it just isn't the same as being there. I feel that I'm just generally a better person when I have those two around.
Right, and I was going to say, sorry to interrupt there, but I was going to
That's right.
say, I think when you're growing up with a disability, it constantly crosses your mind that, oh man, am I going to get married? Can I have kids? Like, it's really hard to deal with, and I
Yep.
honestly felt the same way through my teens. It was like girls were shutting me down, but high school was so cliquey that, like,
Yeah.
you're not found out yet, and people think, oh, I need a girlfriend at 12. Well, no, you've got years of growing up, and
Yeah.
even at 16 years old, you're going to be different the next year and the year after that. So that's really nice to hear that story because, like you say, is that all? Well, holy shit, it's so
Yep.
relieving to hear that from anybody, let alone your
Yep.
significant other, and I'm sure it's really helped you as your psyche, right? Because,
Yep.
like you say, you have a beautiful daughter and a beautiful wife to always talk to and spend time with,
Yep.
and that's, I think, very important. Other than that, how long have you been together with your wife? Sorry.
It should be 14 years now. We've been married 11 years. It'll be 12 years
Right.
in
So,
October.
and to say that 14 or 15 years in is
It'll be 15,
quite
sorry. Yep.
inspiring.
Math is bad.
Yeah, it's that's inspiring for me because I have a girlfriend now and she's also disabled and there's so many challenges, but we've made it work and it's really good to see that connection for sure. I have a little segment here called Rapid Fire. I'm just going to ask you
Yep.
a few random questions here, just out of curiosity, and
Yep.
feels like a rerun. But who is your favorite Scotsman?
Again, I paused the last time. At least we've got a bit of practice now. So probably Billy Connolly. Just his sheer dark humour. The guy had an abusive childhood and he was able to make it into something really positive. So it's something to admire.
That's a big one. That's my dad and I really like him. We love our British humor. What
Yep.
is your go-to meal? What's your favorite thing to eat?
Again, I always struggle with this. There's so many different options, but I think anything that's in tempura batter, frankly, like we like a bit of Japanese food, but one of my best friends used to manage a Japanese restaurant, and we used to eat there for a reduced price, so we got a bit of a taste for it. So that or anything Japanese.
And that's good. I love my sushi, so I agree with you there. I already know the answer to this, but what is your favorite video game of all time, and why is that?
Yeah. So Final Fantasy VII was my favourite video game ever. It was the first game I played that was expansive. This was before open world. You start off in this little town, this little area. You think there's nothing beyond it, then all of a sudden you've got this big, massive, sprawling world open to you. Yeah, the game just blew me away. The soundtrack's amazing. I still listen to it to this day. And I've recently bought the Final Fantasy VII Remake. I bought a PlayStation 4 just for that. That's how much I love this bloody game. And it just changed my life. If it wasn't for that game, I wouldn't write. I used to write fan fiction based on it. And that's how I got into writing in the first place. So I owe a lot to that game. Even till now, my daughter falls asleep listening to the soundtracks from those games. That's her lullabies that we put on. So yeah.
I think vicariously your kids live through you, right? There's
That's it.
always a few things that get passed down. And as you said, you're a big writer. What was your favorite book as a kid?
Georgie's Marvelous Medicine by Roald Dahl, without a doubt at all. It was just this really clever story. And it's one of these things as well where there's a perception that a lot of people have that family are to be loved regardless, which in some ways has its merits. But I mean, when there's a family member who is mean to you, who is just detestable, who is a vicious, nasty person, you don't have to stay there because that person's your family. And just like George, his gran was a evil old crone. You know, he didn't enjoy being around her at all. And that was the first exposure I'd had to grandparents or just elder people, parents, being mean. And just this little idea of this little boy who would mix up a magical potion that would change this lady's demeanour into something else. And it was just that creativity that Roald Dahl had that just blew me away as a kid. I often spent time as a child just putting random things like shampoo and mouthwash into a sink and stirring it up to see what colour it became just because of that. Word of advice though, don't drink it. I didn't do that, but I just want to make sure that no one else tries it either.
That's very good advice. It's just like the Tide Pod thing. Don't eat that.
Yeah.
Don't drink that. It's
not
not good. Getting back into the questions here a little bit. So as you've touched on before, you are a father of one. Her name is Winter. What kinds of things as a parent are different when you are disabled, and how do you manage with the different jobs as a parent?
Well, it's a difficult one. There's so many little things that pop up. Quite often it's small things like we take her to a karate class every week. It's been on hold due to everything that's gone on, of course. But that place, the car park, is insane. There's a whole bunch of accessible parking bays that look onto a football pitch, and parents who drop their kids off at football park there, regardless of whether they have the badge or the placard, as you call it over there. So quite often when we go there, it's a fight for me to get across that car park. There's days where I'll push through it. There's days where I'll just have to be sensible and call ahead and maybe get the karate instructor to come out and get her. You know, like quite often I'll find there are people around who are willing to help. But when it gets to things like that, it does make you feel a bit less than sometimes that you can't do something as basic as that. Or there's days where, like, my wife's changed her job now, but there's days when Winter was at school and I'd have to drop her off because my wife was already at work by that point. And I'd be struggling with my condition and my legs would be really, really bad and my daughter would be late for school. And it's that way I used to beat myself up over that, thinking that I was letting her down. Like, I can't even get her to school on time, you know, what type of dad am I? And then you realise that these things really don't matter. The school have an understanding of my condition. And I now feel I'm in a point where I could actually speak back if someone did raise this with me. You know, so I'd say, oh, your daughter's always late. I'd be fine, well, I have a muscle wasting condition. It's not my daughter's fault, so please don't, like, give her any penalties for this. You know, so I think just generally my condition getting in the way can be horrible. But there's little things like Winter loves to do, like go swimming, and I know I can't do that. So a lot of times I feel like I'm letting her down by not being able to do these really basic things. But then I turn it on its head and I think about the things I can do. So I write stories for her. So I think it's really, really cool that there's a child out there whose parent makes up bedtime stories that we don't always have to rely on the book, you know, or we can play games. We wrote a book a while ago that I'm looking for her to finish the illustrations on, first of all, but it's called The Snottery Daughter. It's about a daughter with a cold, which is probably quite topical with all the COVID-19 stuff right now. But it's about a little girl with a cold who sneezes over the house and then the cars and then the street and then the world, you know. And it was just a lot of fun doing that with her. So we're looking to do more things like that. I think it just pays. Like, if you have a condition that is limiting like this, find other things you can do, or think about the things you can do that other parents can't. You know, if you have a particular talent, show that off to your kid. Like, if you can sing or play an instrument, then do that. Have a jam session with your kid, you know. I think it's just really important to find things you can do rather than focusing on everything you can't.
Exactly, and that's a good lesson for young people with disabilities. Is I think as a little kid, you see your friends running faster than you, or you know, they're doing more than you. But if you find the right people, they will always accept you for what you are, and it doesn't matter. Like, a lot of my friends, we play video games. I've always said video games allow me to play sports or to run around, and that's very, very dear to my heart to be able to do that. What would you say you are most proud of your daughter for?
Just her general compassion and her understanding of others. We touched on this before as well, but having a parent with a disability exposes you to disability, obviously at a very young age. You know, you grew up around it, you know what it is, and you know what it means. You know, it doesn't make that person less of a person. My daughter's understanding of disability generally is always impressive. Instead of looking at someone who may move in an unusual way due to, say, a condition such as cerebral palsy, my daughter won't stare. Instead, my daughter will ask more about the condition. So I can see that that man has a condition, Dad. Do you know what it is? And also, I won't assume. I can't make a judgment based on what someone has. I don't know that person personally. But in those circumstances, I'm not ashamed to go up to someone as well. I think being in a wheelchair as well means you've already got that connection. You've got that common ground whereby we can have a conversation with someone. And you say, my little girl was curious about your condition. If you'd like to speak about it, I have muscular dystrophy. And go on to have this whole conversation so she knows more. We have a nephew called Ben. Ben has a condition called microcephaly. Effectively, his skull is too small for his brain to develop. So Ben is heavily brain damaged. He can't walk. He can't speak. He's peg-fed. And he's got only peripheral vision. You know, and Winter's grown up around him her whole life. Even as a baby, we put her on his knee. Through no fault of his own, he would occasionally move his arms and do the odd scratch here and there. Again, not an awareness of what he's doing at all. But we didn't shy away or pull away or snatch and go, no, we can't do that. We let Winter sit with Ben and get used to him. And the connection those two have is insane. You know, they're just so close as cousins. And just seeing my daughter be like that is absolutely amazing. But knowing that my child doesn't see people with disabilities just as the wheelchair is very, very nice. You know, it's impressive. And at 8 years old, I think that emotional intelligence is going to take her a long way.
For sure. And I shared a post on my page a few days ago about compassion in children. And I believe that from toddlers, they should be exposed and learn that we're no different. Like my two nieces are 3 and almost 2. And it's just so, you're so grateful that you're able to teach these kids to not look at the wheelchair or the limp or the walking cane, whatever it is. It's very important. And I'm glad at 8 years old, she'll be like that for life because of you. And you should be very grateful for that. And I know you are.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
Apart from that, what kinds of work do you do with charities and disability awareness?
So before I started my current job, I used to run a mental health and disability network. We spoke about this before. If anyone knows the company Publix, also known as Tesco over in the UK, they actually have a banking sector called Tesco Bank. And I was the chair of their disability and mental health network for 2 years. It was called Enabled, and it was an amazing time for me. I was able to meet so many interesting people, and I was able to speak openly about the issues I've had. Like whenever we had meetings, I would openly talk about the fact that I had anxiety and depression. You know, I knew that was brought on by my condition. But I'm more than happy to stand up and put forward everything that's happened to me so we can normalise this, you know. Like people do have mental health concerns whether they have a disability or not. You know, there's always something there with people. And I think it's really important to talk about it. And that gave me the opportunity to do that. The current job I have, they don't have a network such as that, but they have a really good diversity network. So I'm actually going to get on board with them. I'm currently furloughed at the moment, which forbids me from taking any involvement there, but it's something I do want to get back to. I'm also hoping to self-publish a collection of poems called Straight Out of Dystrophy, just this T-shirt that you see all the time. The intention being that any profits from that would go to the Muscular Dystrophy campaign here in the UK. So if that comes to fruition, I'll give you a shout.
Yeah, for sure. I'd love to be part of that. So like you said, everybody's either furloughed, laid off, whatever term you want to use. A lot of things, unless you are essential, have come to a standstill. What advice would you give to people to keep raising awareness for those like companies and charities to keep the awareness going for the disabled community?
It's always a simple one. It's just talk about it though. If you have like a social media platform, even just your own Facebook, feel free to share and comment and just engage people with conditions and with things you're going through. I find it quite good to blog. You know, that's a really accessible way to do things. It means you can keep a record of your own life as well. You give people an avenue to see into your mind, but I think just talking about it. It's the same approach to mental health as I said. Like, we need to speak about these things. The more people talk about it, the more normal things become, and the more accepted people with disabilities become in this world.
Well, and like you say, there's that stigma that a man, women too, but being men ourselves, it's, oh, you got to be tough all the time, or men don't
Yep.
cry. Well, that's just a load of shit, to be
No,
honest. Like
absolutely,
it's
absolute bullshit.
like, and what would you say to that stigma personally, and how have you ever been in that situation where, you were ashamed to cry, and if so, have you overcome that?
So I think that anxiety attack that I'd had at work totally changed the way I viewed these things. I do have that whole thing in my head. I think most men do as well, that I have to be tough, I have to be strong. But see, this whole man up mentality, just get over it, deal with it, that has to die. That has to just get to, it's the fact that so many of us are seen as, like, by others, oh, he's crying, that means he's not strong. It takes a strong man to cry. That's one thing I've always said. Like, I'm the strongest person in this house because I'll cry in front of my daughter. And I think that makes it normal. I'm sick of this whole thing where people go, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine. And then it all bubbles over and then they're not. You're not used to yourself. You're not used to anyone else when you're broken. So look after yourself. Talk about these things. And if you have to cry, fucking cry. It's allowed. There's not a law against it. It's kind of, as we spoke before, when I progressed on to using a walking stick, there's so much concern, like just so much, what's the word? Just self-awareness. That I had this condition, I had this walking stick, until I took 5 minutes to sit and realised that no one gives a shit that I'm using a walking stick. The same way that no one gives a shit if I'm crying, If you're not close to me and you see me crying and you want to judge me, then do it, but, do it from over there. There's nothing to be ashamed of. Like, we're humans, we have emotions, bloody let them out. That's all I would say.
Yeah, it's true. And then because of the Duchenne's, I'm on steroids. And when I was growing up, I would cry at the littlest thing. But my mom told me one day, don't worry about it. Just cry it out. Because if you hold all those emotions in, you're just going to be miserable. You're just going to be, you're going to turn into a crabby old man that no one wants to spend time with. And I think that has a lot of weight for a lot of men, a lot of my friends too. It's hard for them to admit it, but just cry. Who cares? Like, if someone's going to call you a little bitch for it, that's their problem, really.
Exactly.
And that's just it. Well, Joe, thanks again for doing this. I really appreciate it. I'll probably be posting it in the next few days, and
that's right.
Just if you can go ahead and just share what your handle is on Instagram, just for people if they want to check you out.
Yeah, of course. So the handle I use on Instagram is Dystrophydad. Maybe see it spelled here. It might be reversed depending on how the camera feed's going. But just Dystrophy, Dystrophydad. You'll find me there. I post pretty much anything that comes to mind. So I do post poems, I post videos of myself and my daughter, and just general things about mental health and disability. As I said, it's important to talk about these things, and I feel that if I use my experiences to help others, then I'm doing the right thing, I've got this condition, so I may as well use it for something positive.
Exactly. Well, there you go. Just check him out, people. He's great. Again, Joe, thank you very much. You have yourself a good one.
You too. Take care. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.